Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Understanding CBD. As always, I'm Stephen Wallman from Wallman's Apothecary. We have another fantastic guest for you today. This one is one of my personal favorites. When I first learned about the medicinal properties of cannabis versus recreational, I did a lot of research, and we're probably going back almost 10 years. And this gentleman was producing content back then with podcasts and videos on YouTube that were educating people about what I'm still passionate about today. So it's really cool to have him on the show today. His name is Dr. Jake Felice. We're going to talk about his passion, which is the healing power of plants and the connection that they have to humans. And it is the most important thing to our listeners today, I believe. And the power that you have inside of yourself, the power your body has to heal itself, and not only heal itself internally, but also empowering that with the connection to things outside of ourselves, other people, plants, and so forth. So I want to introduce you to Dr. Jake Felice and bring him in. Hey, Dr. Jake.
Hey, Steve, it's really good to be here. Thanks for bringing me on.
Thanks. I'm really excited to have you. And in preparation, because I have to be honest, I'm a little bit nervous because it's almost like, my kids were excited to see Taylor Swift. But in my world, not to embarrass you, I get kind of geeky with content, and your passion for not only the plant, medicine, internal power, martial arts. I share a lot of those same passions with you. I haven't gotten out on a surfboard yet on the waves. I've done some what is it? Just paddle boarding. But I
Oh,
have a
yeah.
bunch of questions here that I prepared for this. Most likely, we aren't going to go through them the way it's designed. You okay with that?
Oh, always, always. I love to go with that flow. It's always a great way to ride.
Awesome. And for those that don't know Jake, Dr. Jake, you can follow him on Instagram. He's here on LinkedIn. He has a company called Sweetwater Holistics. That's his LLC where he produces content. He's been teaching and healing people for decades. So I urge you, if you enjoy anything of this conversation, to go search him out and look for some more information about him because it really is fascinating, and it will change the way that you see yourself and the way you relate to the planet. So I wanted to talk a little about the first concept that I wanted to have you share with us, and this is stemming from the belief that most people think that when someone says cannabis is medicine, it comes with a wink, wink. Like most people think it's really just to get high. Can you share a little bit or elaborate about plants as medicine?
Oh, yeah. I love this topic. It's a great topic. So we have to think about it biologically and from the plant's perspective because we're humans, so we can run away from the tiger. And um, what I think most people don't get a lot about plants is that plants have mechanisms for sensing what is going on in the environment. But because they can't run away, their responses are different. And one of the biggest ways that they respond is chemically. So we can talk about THC or CBD and why the cannabis plant makes those. But I think just to pull back, we can talk about other plants. So, for example, with lima beans, because there's a lot of agricultural studies on this. If a caterpillar is coming to feed on the lima bean and starts eating on its leaves, the lima bean senses this right away. And not only does it sense it right away, but it can tell by the saliva of the particular caterpillar that is eating it exactly what type of a caterpillar that is. And then it will produce a mixture of terpenes to deter that caterpillar right away. And it will do it in the exact location where the caterpillars are eating. And if for whatever reason the infestation continues after a couple of hours, it doesn't just do it in that place, but it does it throughout the whole plant, and it will also send chemical signals through the soil to other lima beans in the neighborhood and say, hey, we got a situation over here on row number 3. The caterpillars are here, and all of the plants start producing these protective molecules. So that's just one way that the plants are able to sense what is happening in their environment, create a chemical reaction for their own protection. So if we talk about CBD, for example, and I've told this story a lot, so I don't want to bore anybody who's seen a lot of my content, but probably a lot of new folks on here. In the early era of our country, Thomas Jefferson and many of the founding fathers and many of the colonists were required by law to grow hemp on their farms. It was part of the agriculture and industrial strength of the country for us to grow hemp. Hemp for victory, as it was called. And one of the things that was noticed was that if hemp plants were grown in and around a pond, all the fish died. What was going on in that situation is that the hemp plant produces CBD for a very specific biologic purpose. It does it to prevent competing foliage undergrowth that will take up its soil, that will take up its sunshine, that will take up the water and compete with it. So the CBD, which is in an acid form, when it rains, gets washed into the soil. It prevents the growth and the cellular reproduction of other plants. But if that goes into the pond, it doesn't kill the fish directly, but it affects the algae in the pond. The fish lose their primary source of food, and eventually they die. So the plants are making molecules not just for some random woo-woo purpose, but they are making specifically targeted molecular cocktails for very specific purposes because they are able to sense what is happening in their environment. And an old Greek physician once said that it is the dose that is the poison, so that even a poisonous chemical at a right dose can be beneficial. In the case of CBD, what is happening in plants is it's slowing down the reproductive process of the competing organisms. But interestingly, CBD in humans has anti-inflammatory properties, and it also has some known, and I'm not saying this for humans, but in animal studies, anti-cancer properties where it is slowing down the reproductive process. So these molecules are made by many plants through an intelligent process, through selective evolution, specifically to target organisms. I could talk about this all day, so let me give one more example. Another plant that senses an infestation will put out a terpene that will sense which caterpillar it is, and it puts out a terpene fragrance. And instead of doing what the lima bean does, which is affect the caterpillars directly, it calls in a predatory wasp, and it says, it's talking to the wasp, and it's saying, hey, we got food here on row number 3. Come and get we got a buffet going on. We got a caterpillar buffet happening over here. Come and get it. So there are very specifically targeted reasons that are specifically targeting the nervous system of the wasps in this case. And then they will also put out terpenes. You know how hops can make us sleepy and how certain terpenes will make us sleepy, that slow the caterpillars down, put them into couch lock mode, as a lot of the stoners say. And so the caterpillars slow down and the wasps come, and these molecules are made for very specific purposes, not just some random woo-woo-ness.
Well, when plants are defending themselves or creating these compounds, chemicals, you mentioned some terpenes to communicate to, I'm sure it's not just other animals or pests, but it could be other plants. How does it actually communicate? Because they don't speak, they don't have mouths.
They have chemoreceptors.
Can you explain a little bit about how this communication goes from plant? Is it through the air? Is it through the soil?
Some of it can be through the air, and some of it can be through the mycelial network in the soil. The soil has fungal elements that, and there are different, there's a fruiting body of a fungus, but there are also mycelium that are kind of like little connections throughout the soil. And so the good, healthy soil, not all soil, but good, healthy soil has communicative networks throughout. And this is a well-known feature of the within the science of botany and agriculture itself. And I posted this a long time ago. It's not something that I am super aware of the mechanisms, but they also have certain trees have an optic receptor. And I posted a video on this a long time ago so that they actually don't bump into each other when the wind is blowing. I thought that that's really cool. But, plants have, we don't see them move, but you can watch a sunflower throughout the day, track and follow the sun, and then at night the leaves will, or the floral parts will close in and around it. And some plants will open in the daylight and close at night, and other flowers, unusual ones, will open at night and close in the daytime. So plants are doing things in time scales that we're just not used to. So that's another way we can kind of look at something from the plant's perspective.
So with our limited perspective, obviously, we won't be able to perceive these in real time, in our real time, although there's this communication network you're saying in the mycelium underneath in the soil that are allowing plants to communicate. I know pollen getting put into the air. I guess that's another.
That's a genetic communication where the genes from one plant are communicated directly to the genes of another plant, and you have the joining of the male and the female parts, and a new life is formed. Yes, so that's a biological or a type of a genetic communication.
So then, I mean, obviously there's much more to go into there, but kind of keeping it on to the target of plants are as medicine. So that's what plants are doing to communicate to themselves, to heal themselves. But when it comes to humans or our pets, how does that mechanism that they have in their world, is some of that also intended for us, or from the plant
some of it
perspective?
certainly can. Yes. So fruits are attractive for us because the plant wants us to eat that, and they like the birds to eat the blackberries, and then the birds eat the blackberries, and then they go and they do their bird business on your windshield of your car or in the field, and it spreads with a little fertilizer. Fruits are designed to be eaten. Fragrant, beautiful smelling fragrances are designed to be attracting, generally pungent or smells that we don't like. Certain plants we don't like that. There are biologic reasons for that. Absolutely. Also, it's very interesting to me how animals interact with plants medicinally. Insects, which we don't think of as being very intelligent, they have little nervous systems and they have little tiny neural nets for a brain. But beetles, for example, if they get a fungal infection or a mite infestation on their shells, they will go and seek out plants with certain terpenes that have antifungal or antimicrobial properties to help them medicinally. Birds, for example, birds of prey, owls, hawks, eagles, when they bring that prey back to their young, that's meat. And in the summertime, that's going to create a stinky mess. So they will also bring in leaves and branches that have antibacterial properties and weave them into their nests. Bears will dig up osha root they go and they hibernate through the winter. And in the winter, they're in their den the whole time, and they'll sometimes get ticks and infestations on them. And the male bear will wake up and he will go and he will dig osha root up and he will eat it. And that will help him, because you get a little constipated if you're a bear sitting all through the winter, and that helps clear that whole thing out. And then he will chew the osha root and rub it as a paste, and will also bring osha root back for the female. We see chimpanzees. I can go on and on about this, so just cut me off when you're ready. Chimpanzees that have intestinal parasites, worms. If they have a worm in their intestine, a specific type of worm, they will pick specific plants for that purpose. But if that infestation or the worm is in the stomach or in the esophagus, they will pick different plants. And sometimes you will see them testing the plants. They will take the plant and they will put it on their mouth and they will sit there and they will taste. I'm not sure what they're doing. I'm anthropomorphizing there, but they will sit with this leaf in their mouth for a while and then they will decide, is this good or is this not good? Um,
Yeah.
would you like a few more examples? We're here to
no,
talk about CBD and other
let's
things like
pause. We'll get
that.
to the CBD stuff, but I'm interested in asking you a question about this because in animals in captivity. So at the
Mhm.
zoo, if you take a bear that was born in the zoo, raised in the zoo, given bottle fed by a human, um, and it's raised to an adulthood, it's used to getting its food thrown into the cage, and then you take that bear and throw it out in the woods, is it going to know these?
I don't know, but my understanding, my very limited understanding, is that a lot of times animals have a challenging time being released into the wild. That's why you'll see a lot of nonprofits will be devoted to helping them return. So there is a process.
Okay.
I do know a little on the chimp side. The chimps will observe others and learn from their actions, and so they will look and see what the healthy ones are doing. So there is a little bit of a social learning process that is happening with monkeys, but I don't think you can make that argument for insects, and certainly it would be more of a challenge for birds. But even dogs will do this. You'll see your dogs eating, everybody's seen dogs eating grass. Sometimes dogs will seek out certain types of grass and not others. One of their favorite types of grass is called quack grass. It's very soothing for the digestive tract. And I don't know that they learn that from anyone. I think that that's kind of an instinctual process. But that's a really good question. To what degree? But certainly with humans, in the 6,000-year record of humans where we've had writings, there are tens and tens and tens of thousands of different descriptions of different plants being used medically, and the words for the plants usually mean something. For example, we talked about the bears with the osha root. The A Plains Indian language for osha root is called bear medicine, but also very interestingly, the Aztecs way down south in Central America also called the same plant bear medicine. And we also see things throughout human culture. For example, throughout human culture, yarrow. The Romans called it soldier's weed because it was so good for wound healing. All human cultures, wherever it grows, use yarrow for wound healing. And to move over to the hemp and cannabis side, everywhere hemp and cannabis grew in a wild setting or was cultivated, humans have used it for medicine, including for pain and for many other purposes.
So this domestication process, or even really the education process that we measure ourselves to by going through schools and colleges to learn how to live, quote unquote, is further separating us from this tribal knowledge that seems so valuable, right? I mean, the problems now we see are, stress, anxiety, pain, disease, and people are now looking to modern science. It's very frequent where I'm having a conversation with a chiropractor, a doctor, a healthcare provider about cannabis and hemp as medicine, and they're having a hard time understanding the connection because in their mind, the people are looking for a pill. So this domestication of humans and the separation from our tribal roots seems to be some of the problem here.
I think that we have a sense of separation, and that goes to loneliness, which is now this sense of separation is now becoming a public health issue. And what you are talking about is a way of being human, and our connection not only with each other but with the planet. That is, it is part of our birthright. It's a part of an experience of being human that a lot of us don't get. And a lot of this loneliness I had originally thought would have been elderly, which it is, but it's also kids these days that are having uh, terrible emotional sense of loneliness, anxiety, dissatisfaction. And it's interesting. I could pull the name of the book up. I'm listening to it on tape right now. It's a certain type of a history that I'm listening to, but this particular author, and the name is escaping me, so I apologize. But he is talking about in the written history of the U.S. As the colonial movement was heading westward, uh, the colonialists were having impacts with the native people, and there was warfare. And it's very well known that certain tribes, such as Comanche, would actually kidnap and take children of a certain age and back and bring them into the tribe. And invariably, and even Benjamin Franklin wrote about this, but invariably, and not on the Comanche, but this was more Eastern Indians, Eastern American, and I'm sorry if I'm using the wrong terminology, the inappropriate Native Americans. Um, when the the white children of the settlers were taken to the and brought into the Indian culture, they very much enjoyed it. And when they were brought back to the Anglo culture, they wanted to return home, and many of them would run away and go back. Also, the opposite happened when the native people were brought onto the reservations or into the Western culture through either becoming orphaned or for whatever purpose. They also wanted to go back to the traditional cultures. And I think that we don't even realize that there is a certain part of being human that we miss. It's kind of like a blind person who's blind at birth, or you're deaf at birth. You grow up with that. You don't know what it's like to have lost your sight. There's not as much trauma as a person who loses their sight at, say, the age of 24. We almost really don't even know what we're missing in a certain sense.
So how do we, or how would you guide someone that is now listening to this and saying, you know what, it makes a lot of sense what Dr. Jake is talking about. This, I am feeling somewhat alone, and as many times as I scroll through my TikTok or Facebook to like, and as much as I post to engage with other entities, if let's just say that outside myself, it doesn't seem to work. So I want to look for something else. Where would someone start to look at plant medicine when they're really just not convinced of it yet? But how would they start to? Because I believe in order to really make a change, you have to experience something to kind of grip you and keep you going versus just listening to a podcast. Is there like a getting started in a plant medicine that you would suggest?
I think that I think that there are a lot of skills to being human that we can learn sometimes quickly and sometimes not as quickly. But one thing I would always say is learn what you know. There's things that I already know that I'm not practicing. So learning from that, learning from my own knowledge and my own mistakes is one thing. But also getting out of my, I'll speak to my, getting out of my personal environment and getting out to of the city and into the forest or out to the beach and on the ocean. Think about how you feel. Think about how you feel when you go to the beach. Even if there's a bunch of other people there, hopefully their music's not terrible. But if their music's terrible, that's the human element that you're not liking. But what about that sunset? And that's a type of a connection. In terms of the plant world, I think that there are you. It helps to have someone introduce you. So, like the sick chimpanzees are watching the healthy ones and seeing what they're doing. Um, using People recommend CBD all the time. So on the CBD side, if you're having a sense of pain, chronic or anxiety or sleep issues, that might be a reason to try it. I find for folks with digestive issues, that's a really good place to start. But the thing is with plants, there's a lot of blending that can happen. So for digestive issues, for example, we hardly ever use just one herb. And that's one of the problems, I think, with the cannabis industry at large. And I've been beating the drums now for 10 years, and maybe people will start listening to me. Hardly anybody in botanical medicine just uses one plant. Let's take digestion, for example. If there is a digestive problem, there are a few things that really help a lot of things. So one are bitter herbs. Dandelion is a bitter herb. Bitter herbs taste bitter. You can even get the bitters at the liquor store. They sell in the bottle. They're
Yeah, the
called
Angostura
bitters.
bitters. I used to
Yeah,
be a
yeah, yeah, yeah.
bartender,
That's a
so yeah.
bitter. Those are bitters,
Yeah.
and those will work too. Not for with a, but with food you take bitters, and you take an aromatic or aromatic herbs. Oregano is an aromatic herb. Peppermint is an aromatic herb, and the bitters literally get the hormones and the digestive juices of the digestive tract going, and the aromatics get the peristalsis moving. So you get the digestive secretions coming out and you get the peristalsis going. But you have to use different herbs to do that. And then in between meals, you use soothing herbs, which are known as demulcents. Licorice is a phenomenal one, but not good for everybody if you have high blood pressure. So this is why you need somebody who knows the plants. But one of my favorite herbs is marshmallow, not the candy, not the sweet, but the plant, plant that the original marshmallow came from. You can even get teas that are very demulcent and have those between meals. So we hardly ever use one plant at a time, but they can be used for pain relief. That's a great one because you get instant feedback. Cannabis of all types can be good for some people for pain, but so can willow bark, and so can boswellia. Frankincense is another one of my favorites. And if we're sticking with herbs, maybe I should just give a quick talk about willow. Willow has been shown experimentally to have equivalency in pain relief. It is the precursor for aspirin. Aspirin has a problem, though. It's bad for the stomach. All NSAIDs are terrible for the stomach. All of them. Really wretched for the stomach.
So NSAIDs would be like over the counter.
Ibuprofen.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ibuprofen is an NSAID. Aspirin is not. NSAIDs are usually hitting COX-2, but the aspirin hits both cyclooxygenase 1 and 2. But in the willow also will come with so the salicylates come with polyphenols, and the polyphenols in the willow are also soothing to the digestive tract. So with the plant medicine, you're getting more than one chemical, and many of the times those chemicals will have additive or synergistic effects that can and have been measured, but nobody really talks about them because marketing requires money. And I've been talking for a long time here, but Steve, when was the last time you saw a lettuce commercial? What's your favorite lettuce commercial? You've never seen a lettuce commercial. Lettuce is not advertising itself on TV. Neither is dandelion, neither is willow bark, but certainly you're going to see Aleve on TV. You're going to see Motrin, ibuprofen, all of these things advertised on TV. And pay attention, folks, when you're watching that commercial, to the little man behind the screen who talks really fast and says a bunch of things really, really, really fast. Those are the important words you should be listening to, not the flowery
Yeah,
stuff.
it's the small words at the bottom of the screen, and
those are the ones that you need to read. Yes,
whether it's a prescription drug or an over-the-counter drug, it sounds like man is getting its guidance from nature, because when you go to the doctor, you get, hey, we'll take this drug, and then you let me know how, take one, call me in the morning. And then you say, yeah, it worked for this, but I have this other side effect here. Oh, okay. Well, then here's another thing. So the next thing you know, this polypharmacy comes in and you're on 12 different drugs. When
if you are on 12 different medications, there is a statistically, I believe that the number is 10. At 10, that is nearly a statistic certainty that you are having a negative drug interaction. And I believe that it is with 5 medications, statistically, half of the time you're having a negative drug interaction.
Which means one of them is what? Not one of those drugs are.
More than one of them are combining to have a negative effect on the physiology.
Got it. Got it. So the people that are taking the pharmacy drugs that aren't using plant medicine, obviously, in order to really get down the right road, we're going to need somebody to help figure out which right. It's not something that people are going to be able to do themselves. And
That's correct. If you are on multiple medications, for most drugs that are not prescribed PRN as needed, there are frequently medical reasons that is necessary and proper ways, especially psych drugs, for example, to be to wean down or get off of the medications. And so there's money in drugs. And also remember, chronic disease is almost 3/4 of our medical problems are chronic diseases, and those are diseases that are not being taken care of. They're just smoldering and either staying the same or getting worse. Can be a very clinically, it can be a big challenge to get people off of drugs. And depending on the jurisdiction, naturopathic doctors, one of the most important reasons that we have clinical prescriptive rights. I can write for drugs in California and in Washington State because I have licenses there. But the important thing is you cannot take a person off of a drug unless you are legally able to put them on a drug. So I would recommend a naturopathic doctor if you're in a licensed state who that is their specialty, to help address those situations. But if you don't have that access, which is sadly most people, you can still do the right things with your diet. You can still do proper and appropriate exercise, and you can still work on getting adequate sleep. And those 3 things will also help the endocannabinoid system, along with other things like CBD and cannabinoids and other plants.
so you've talked a lot about some other plants today, and which is fantastic. But I know your favorite plant is cannabis.
It is
Um,
my favorite plant. I have to say it's my favorite. It's my favorite botanical medicine. I have others that I really love, but it is my favorite. If I were
what about cannabis puts it at that status? Why is it your favorite?
Well, there are more types of cannabis than there are kinds of dogs. So when I say dog, you have a picture in your mind, I have a picture in my mind, and everyone in the audience have a different picture in their mind. Same thing as with cannabis. But just like dogs can do so many things, some dogs can pull sleds, but not all dogs can pull sleds, right? Some cannabis can do really good things for certain conditions and others can't. But it's an extremely versatile plant medically, has a potentially broad applications medically for pain, for sleep, for anxiety, for symptom relief at low toxicity for a bunch of different conditions. It also has industrial applications on the hemp side. Hempcrete, also graphene does amazing things on the industrial side, and also on the food side. We could feed the whole planet with hemp seed. All humans on the planet could be fed with hemp seed, and it has a perfect protein, and it has an ideal anti-inflammatory lipid profile. So if I were stuck on a proverbial desert island and I could only have one thing with me, I would choose cannabis because I would have food, I would have building materials, I would have medicine, I would have recreation. It's just extremely versatile.
Fantastic. So for someone who's now realizing, because of this brilliant conversation, that they'd like to start incorporating cannabis into their life, into their wellness plan, what's a good place to start?
I think if there's a pain issue for many, topicals are a great place to start, whether with or without. Also, major areas, and you really need, especially if it's a THC product, you need some advice, and the general advice is going to be use a lot less than you need, using a very small amount. But on the CBD side, if you have pain, try it out. But anxiety, sleep. And for sleep, I find it best as a short term. I don't think that, I mean, some people use it all the time, and that can work for them. But I find that most sleep aids are best with short term. But I'm a big fan of topicals. And even if the topical does have THC in it, it will not give you a head high. And topicals can be real good for hand pain, elbow pain, knee pain. They're really good for the weekend warrior syndrome through the shoulders. If you are like me and are sedentary for many, many days at a time, and then you go out and you overdo it, it can be very good for that type of a situation. And it's mildly effective for pain. And also, I think hemp foods are wonderful. The hemp seed is a great thing to add to the diet. Also, hemp oils can be added, and you can get good fiber supplements from hemp as well. Those are other good places to start. What are your thoughts on that, Steve?
On where to get started with
Yeah,
cannabis?
yeah.
I always start with things not to do sometimes. Like if you're just getting started with cannabis, don't go to the dispensary and get something to smoke, especially if you're not a smoker.
Don't go
So
talk to Jimmy at the dispensary.
yeah, don't go talk to the dispensary bud tender. Now a lot of them are, most of them are very compassionate. They have been,
Yes. Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
they do have some knowledge, but normally enough knowledge to be dangerous. So don't go to the dispensary, and to start with cannabis, you shouldn't start smoking. That's one of my first things. I think topical is a great thing if you have some sort of pain. Most of the challenges that a lot of people come to me with are anxiety and sleep issues. So what I always also suggest, and a lot of the nurses and doctors that we work with suggest, is starting with very low THC, because a lot of
Ultra
people
low.
go right
Ultra low.
to
I usually I'm very comfortable with a 1 milligram dose. A lot of people think that's too low. 2.5 milligrams. I think by the time you're getting up into 5, you might not need that much. What do
well,
you? Go ahead.
well, yeah, I mean, I honestly, I don't know. I seem like everything is, I do a lot of experience personally, so I can really only go based on my own personal
Hmm.
experience
Hmm.
of trying, and as producing cannabis products and growing for most of my life. It wasn't only until I guess recently 6 years or so, where I've looked at a lab report to actually
Oh yeah,
identify what is in the cannabis that I'm consuming. And I do see a lot of benefits, and I've, now with all the minor cannabinoids out there, it's so finding someone that you can trust, getting a product that you can trust, that it has been tested, and
absolutely,
um,
and including by a third-party lab, not just by the manufacturer.
right, especially not by the manufacturer. And just to say, a check box that heavy metals, we've been checked, we're passed.
Absolutely. Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
you really,
Good.
it's worth
Good.
looking into the details of a full panel test to make
And
sure it's safe, because you can have side effects to some of these if it has mold in it,
oh yeah, oh yeah.
or
Or
heavy metals.
if you're immune compromised or on immunosuppressive medications, you don't want to be inhaling cannabis smoke. Um, Also, the terpenes have medicinal effects and can have them at very low concentrations, depending on the market. Some areas you are allowed to have the fragrance of cannabis, and let and there is actually a study now showing that the human olfactory sense is a very appropriate way to choose the cannabis. They're not all going to smell good for you. One way you might be able to do that is to pick the one that smells best for you.
Right.
There's actually some science behind that. And we talk about the chimpanzee chewing that leaf to try to decide, am I going to use this plant or am I going to use this plant? And there's one study that I'm aware of that.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's also great advice. Not smoking it is also important. So what other methods? So we talked about
Well,
topical. So what's
let's go through real quickly the pros and cons of each. Okay. Pick a method. The most common ones, oral, topical, inhaled, and then there's something called oral mucosal, and there are others, but they're less common. So pick one of those.
Topical.
Topical. Pros and cons of topical. Pros of topical. Effective for pain. It is no psychoactive effects. Studies show that even if there's THC, I'm not saying that this is a for sure thing, but even with THC, is not in the studies that I have seen is not causing positives on drug tests. Negatives of positives, it usually takes about 2 out of 10 off of the pain. So you're not going to get that neck pain from an 8 down to a 0. That doesn't mean it's not working. If you still have neck pain, give it a number, check pain is at 8, give it a number, put it on, check back in 20 minutes. It's usually down by 2 points. Other cons of topicals, they only last about 2 to 4 hours. So they're not going to get you through the night. Also, depending on the products, cannabinoids are messy, sticky lipids. So it's not a cosmetic you're putting on your face. It is a botanical that is going on. So the textures and sometimes the fragrances might be a turnoff for folks.
What other ingredients should there be in a topical?
Oh, that depends very much so on the person and the situation. But there are studies showing that ethanol, and I'm not saying to use ethanol, which is like a alcohol, will help drive it deeper into the tissues. The oils that it goes with can have medicinal properties. I'm a big fan of copaiba oil. It's very tacky, so a lot of people don't like it, and it has a very earthy smell. But it also has high levels of beta caryophyllene in it and its own anti-inflammatory properties to help drive it deeper into the tissues. I find that it goes well with menthol products, which have salicylate or aspirin-like chemicals that go very well together. And you don't need to have it all in one product. You could put your CBD or topical product on and follow that up with Tiger Balm, or follow it up with an Icy Hot, which is a mentholated product. Even, believe it or not, this is a hack, which I'm not saying I like it or I use it, but Vicks Vapor Rub topically can have some additive and combinatory processes. Now, don't get that near your eyes or you're going to be crying, and don't come crying to me. but there are a lot of ways. There are a lot of ways to combine topicals together for that purpose.
I love that you said that, Doc, because what I've always focused on in using a cannabis product, because of the lack of studies and research on, if you get it's hard enough to find a pure, clean cannabis product, let alone when you see it in a bottle with other ingredients. It's my natural belief that it's going to be a lower quality CBD because the cost of getting all these other products. You can only charge X amount of dollars for a rub that someone's going to use for a certain time. So there's that business side of it. So I've always
absolutely
thought, get a high quality cannabis product, as clean as you can, and of course with as minimal carrier oils as you can, and then layer it like a Tiger Balm, a natural, another herbal topical.
Arnica goes well, and I'm not talking about the homeopathic arnica. I'm talking about the honest to goodness herbal arnica. Oh yeah, and also I tell my client, my manufacturing clients, because I consult for companies, and I say for every botanical product you add to your formulation, you are going to attract a small number of people and you are going to repel a small number of people, because they're going to do the Google research, and if they don't get the right hit, there's a lot to botanicals that you just cannot absorb with Google or even Chat GTP. So I do personally like that approach. And you can also get a THC oriented product and a CBD oriented product. And there's just so many ways to do that. And this is going back to your question about how can I experience this? How can I get a better connection to the plant? And that's certainly one way.
Okay. And you know what? I think we've gone about 45 minutes now, and the time does fly for us. And let me just what I think might be a good idea is to cut it here and then leave leave the visitors and listeners wanting for more. And hopefully you'll join us again for.
I'd be super happy to. And I know we talked a lot about non-CBD, non-cannabis stuff today. So let's do this another time, Steve. And
Yeah, but I think we got enough to get people at least getting their minds thinking about the making the jump, because you've been talking cannabis for decades. I've been doing it maybe for as long, not as publicly, but I still think that 90 some % of Americans at least still think cannabis comes with a wink, wink, and it's not really cannabis is medicine. Um,
let me leave the viewers with this. Cannabis, for people that say first of all, botanicals by definition have to be studied differently than single molecule drugs. But if you are just to look at the volume of peer-reviewed literature on cannabis, it is likely the second most studied plant for medicinal purposes in the entire biosphere of the human planet Earth world, with the possible exception of garlic, because a lot of folks who publish their master's or PhD theses will study garlic because it's really easy to study. But cannabis, which is really hard to study, is maybe by now is past garlic, but is way up there as a number two. Very huge amount of science on it. And maybe we can talk about how to evaluate botanical literature, or a little bit about that in our next talk.
Yeah, I have a list of things we didn't get to. So I think that we just really got the first question, which is the concept of plants as medicine. So we have at least 7 more questions to go down
Awesome.
here, Doc, but no pressure, man. But I'm going to hold you to it. I really appreciate you taking the time today. I enjoy your conversations always. And I hope everyone else found some value in this conversation as well. And you at least helped us to get started, which is the first step of experimenting with some topical products. It's less threatening. You don't have to worry about the taste of something, and it can start you with some experience of plants as medicine, which is a fantastic way to go. So, thanks again, Doc, and everyone for listening. And we'll talk with you again soon.